In 2016, Leonard Boyarsky and Tim Kaine, the original creators of Fallout back from their time at Interplay Entertainment, began production on a new first-person RPG. They both acted as the directors, with Boyarsky handling the writing of the game. This would later be announced in 2018 as The Outer Worlds, a sci-fi role-playing game that is being developed by Obsidian. The game took heavy inspiration from the contemporary sci-fi works while also adding in a heavy dose of retro serial charm, i.e. Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, or a personal favorite, Captain Video. I've not made it a secret that I actually really like The Outer Worlds. I'm on record saying it's one of my favorite games of all time. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the game performed really well. In fact, it did well enough for Xbox Game Studios, the new publisher and development overseer for Obsidian, to have development start for a sequel to The Outer Worlds 2 months before the first game actually released. So yeah, here's the thing. This whole intro may come across as some performative YouTubery, but frankly, I think it's important to set the scene for what the sequel was appearing to be. Private Division, now known as Fictions, is the company that published The Outer Worlds. However, in 2018, Microsoft acquired Obsidian, making them a first-party development studio. Thankfully, this didn't impact the publishing or production of the first game, but then again, they were soft-starting a sequel before the original predecessor even released to the public. The Outer Worlds is a game that tackles the idea of greed and corporatism in its simplest form and provides the player with a variety of comedic scenarios that paint corporations and executives as nothing more than oblivious, self-serving clowns. Now Obsidian is expected to make a sequel to that game while being owned by Microsoft, a real-life megacorporation and multi-trillion-dollar company. I cannot help but see the irony in that. Michael Dowse truly was spitting here. It's worth mentioning as well that this Obsidian and Microsoft union brought about Avowed, an absolute brain-numbing vehicle that exists to make me angry. Avowed is a buggy mess of a video game that, while fun, is also a work that is so shoddily written that it could be interpreted as insulting to the very people it's trying to appeal to. If you want to listen to me complain about Avowed for 88 minutes straight, feel free to watch my— Hello ladies, gentlemen, and my NB friends, and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about the creatively named Outer Worlds 2. As stated earlier and in previous videos, The Outer Worlds is one of my favorite games of all time, and I'll say now that despite the potential red flags that appeared during the development for the sequel, I'd say that it improves on the predecessor in a plethora of ways. That said, there are several glaring flaws that come with the game, thus holding it back from potentially passing the original for me. This video will serve as an analysis of The Outer Worlds 2, but selfishly, it will also give me time to process whether or not it's better than the original. Because it's my video and I determine the rules. And yes, I will be comparing the two despite the sequel being a standalone experience. To explain what I mean, the original game took place in the future of an alternate reality timeline in the distant space colony of Halcyon, which was started and ran by numerous megacorporations. The sequel, The Outer Worlds 2, takes place in a completely different colony, the colony of Arcadia, and was started by a totalitarian sovereignty. Instead of having multiple megacorporations to contend with, the two biggest ones from the last game merged, and now there's just one notable megacorp that the player interacts with. The premise is similar, but it's different enough that it truly stands up as its own game and its own story. Not once did I notice anything where I stopped and was like, oh yeah, that's from the first one. Everything is supposed to exist and operate within a vacuum of its own internal logic and reason. And while I can acknowledge that it can stand up on its own as its own standalone experience, I also believe it's worth drawing comparisons to the predecessor to better illustrate why things do and don't work. I commend the effort to try something new with this game, but— well, let's get into it. And before I forget to mention, there will be spoilers in this video. Also a quick disclaimer, I used NVIDIA Shadowplay to record my footage, as I did with the Avowed video. This is because UE5 and OBS do not get along on my computer. For whatever reason though, the little interface for Shadowplay shows up in some of the clips when it isn't supposed to, so I apologize for that. It bothers me too, don't worry. I've waffled on enough for now. Without further ado, let's jump into The Outer Worlds 2, a messy second chance. First things are indeed first, and what better first are there to start with than the very beginning of the game? In this game's case, the character creator. The character creator is fine. It's really hard to avoid treading water when talking about character creators in games these days because they're all pretty solid. There are lots of options when it comes to customizing the cosmetic appearance of your character. You have lots of different sliders for various details, prosthetic limb options, lots of unique hair options from Avowed made their way over. Listen, all I can say is that this game has a very competent character creator. Does it have a photo mode or a competent third-person camera angle? No, but the attempt was made. Now, I wouldn't ramble on about a character creator if it was purely for aesthetics. Oh no, we have some things to talk about. After diddling with the appearance of your space goober, you're then thrown into a screen where you can select your background. I both love and loathe the idea of this. The idea of using a background to flesh out your character and influence dialogue seems neat on paper. When you have an incredibly vast world like a distant space colony inhabited by humans, you can let your mind go wild with developing a character. When you introduce 6 different soft backgrounds to dictate your backstory for your character, it can feel kind of limiting. Hell, we already have a backstory with a character, but we'll save that for the story section of the video as it'll make more sense when we get there. Moving on, after selecting a background, we have traits. You can choose up to 2 of a variety of positive traits. They're called positive traits in game, but believe me when I say that these traits are genuinely great and come up frequently in gameplay. Traits like Lucky, where you get a permanent plus 5% critical chance and lots of great dialogue options on top of it. You have Resilient, which prevents death if you would die, which is just kind of broken. Brawny lets you power through broken doors that would be inaccessible to the normal player, while also giving you the ability to run into enemies to knock them over. There's lots of variety and different applications that are genuinely felt through moment-to-moment gameplay. Here's the really cool thing though, if you take 2 positive traits, you have to pick a negative one. There are only 3 negative traits that you can choose from, and oh my god are they perfect. You have Abrasive, a trait that locks you from gaining positive rep with any faction. There's Dumb, which makes it so you have to permanently lock 5 of the 12 total skills and you can't invest any points in them ever. And finally there's Sickly, which lowers your max health and max toxicity threshold. All of these negative traits are great counterbalances that can shake up gameplay. For the average gamer, they're probably a horrible wall as they disincentivize exploration and a casual playthrough. If you know the exact build you want though, they can be a bonus. A 15% cut to health in exchange for increased speed and crit chance? If you know what you're doing, that might be the perfect trade-off, and that's what makes a system like this work. I do not recommend this for first-time players, but on subsequent playthroughs and experimental builds, I have genuinely enjoyed the application of this trait system. Following traits, we have skills. Skills in the Outer Worlds 2 do not work like how they did in the first game. For starters, every level up, you only get 2 skill points to invest with. In total, there are 12 skills to put your points into. Engineering, explosives, guns, hack, leadership, lockpick, melee, medical, observation, science, sneak, and speech. Beyond each skill giving a stated bonus to whatever, i.e. speech provides a bonus to damage dealt to humans for some reason, each skill is also used in various dialogue options and your skill investment also dictates your perk selection. As of now, we simply tag 2 skills to begin with. And I say as of now because when we're getting the gameplay section, we'll talk more about skills and perks there. With our skills tagged, we name our character and can begin the game proper, thus concluding the creation segment and moving us on to the actual gameplay. Guns go bang. I made a video where I analyzed the gameplay trailer of the game, and during that I raved about the weapon designs that were showed off. Believe it or not, I still agree with that consensus. Most of the weapons in the game look and feel great. Each weapon, whether it's a ranged plasma spitter, a typical bullet-fed sidearm, or a melee weapon, it has its own weight and balancing that makes it stand out. Every weapon feels unique, and it makes that dynamic between the player and their arsenal much more intimate. Do I use a powerful new weapon that I haven't mastered, or do I take on the next encounter with something weaker that I'm comfortable with? When a game gives you options that you have to consider, then it's a good game. Incredible, I know. Something that makes these weapons even more impactful is just how flippin' awesome they are. I mean, just look at this.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
A flat-out improvement to the weapon system overall is the bountiful amount of ammo types. No longer are there just 3 ammo types that you have to scrounge for. This will eliminate the potential for comedically stockpiling ammo, which I found would happen in the game's predecessor quite often. Instead, this introduced bouts of scarcity and consideration. The world is littered with vending machines like in the first game, but now since there's a more billion different ammo types, it makes it harder to decide what to invest in. If you're rocking multiple ranged weapons and they have different ammo types, what do you take? Add in the fact that there are actually things to spend your money on, a bounty system that'll cost you if you get caught, etc., and you're left penniless. As are we all in these dark times. My point ultimately being that ammo is more important in this game due to the division of different ammo types. Though this also leads into other means of dealing with enemies, like explosives. This is my lame as sin segue to talking about grenades. Grenades make a debut in this game. They exist. Next, let's talk gadgets. There are 4 total gadgets that the player can use. There's the acidic thing that disintegrates bodies, best used in stealth scenarios to hide your tracks. There's the tried and true tactical time dilation, which slows down time. There's the in-ray scanner that hurts my eyes. And finally, there's the Ziranium shield, which shields you from Ziranium. I'm sorry, but I do not like the gadgets in this game. Other than the tactical time dilation, each one is incredibly situational and doesn't offer much beyond the very specific map-based scenarios. I haven't tried a proper stealth build, so I cannot attest to the ideal usage of the body disintegrator. But also at the same time, I've pulled off several stealth takedowns without using it, so maybe it's not necessary at all. The in-ray scanner is made solely for figuring out map-specific puzzles, but you can also upgrade it later to have the same limb targeting that the tactical time dilation used to have in the last game. Don't know why they took it away from one to give it to the other with certain perks, but doesn't matter. And the Ziranium shield is made solely for navigating areas that use Ziranium as a roadblock. If you invest in the science skill, there are perks that give these gadgets more usage, and even still I find them to be underwhelming. The gadgets are all style, no substance. You toggle through your gadgets when the game asks you to use a specific one, not because it's tailored to your build, but rather because the developers want to make you press a key to activate something when they could instead just design something engaging. Oh shit, Ziranium, gotta press Q and walk through it. Like, it's just lazy. Maybe if they had one gadget that you could invest into, if there was a perk that gave tactical time dilation the special vision that the in-ray scanner had, so you could solve puzzles in slow time, instead of, pressing one key to toggle through 4 different items at once, then you could completely eliminate the need for a second gadget slot. Maybe TTD could have a perk that protects the user from Ziranium gas, or maybe Ziranium just doesn't need to be a factor, but that's a different conversation entirely actually. Also, why was TTD nerfed? Was there a problem with rewarding good accuracy? In the first game, TTD would give out debuffs to the enemy you're targeting based on where the body you shot. Shoot an enemy's leg, stagger them, and limit their movement. It was neat. Completely gone from the sequel unless you invest in the science skill and get a perk, or through Marisol's perk line, which doesn't go to TTD, it goes to a different gadget entirely. It's so weird. What happened here? I mentioned skills and perks a bit, so let's talk about those now. I think I've officially found my new favorite system for skill point distribution. I touched up on the skills at the start, but let's talk a bit more about them. As stated, skills offer direct bonuses depending on how many points you sink into them. Want increased damage to auto mechanicals? Invest in the engineering skill. It's a super simple system, and what works even more is the removal of bullshit. Instead of being given 15 or 20 points to invest in a skill, you are instead given 2 whole points to spread across the different skills every level. This removes all the fluff and nonsense that comes with the typical skill point distribution system, and instead it streamlines the entire process. Instead of doing arithmetic to decide the best point distribution, I'm making a quick and sure investment into what would best serve my build and play style now. As much as I love games like, say, Fallout New Vegas, even I have to admit that splitting those skill points becomes annoying and admittedly unengaging after the early game. When you have 2 points to invest every level, and every skill has a flat, clear boost regardless of the associated perks, it makes the deliberation much more impactful for the player. Speaking of which, like Fallout New Vegas, a majority of perks are locked behind your skill point investment. This makes the whole skill and perk system a lot more intimate. Instead of being 2 separate tabs on the screen, they're actually a power couple now. Oh, that's so sweet. What's great about the system is that they work hand in hand and make total sense. If you want to build centered around mines and grenades, then you just need to invest in the explosive skill. And with the skill, you can get incredibly useful perks, like Secret Recipe, which makes it so explosives deal their full damage across the full radius of the, well, explosion. I'm sorry, the Outer Worlds had such a bad perk system. Oh sweet, I got a perk point. Guess I'll deal more damage with improvised weapons. My enemies will cower before me if I'm holding a shovel. Like, what the fuck is this? Contrast that to the Outer Worlds 2, where the perks are worth investing in, and they also have skill point prerequisites. This creates a symbiotic relationship between the two systems and makes the consideration on both aspects all the more rewarding when it all comes together the further in the game you get. One of my favorite aspects of Western RPGs is the build aspect. There's just something so fun and engaging to me about investing points, collecting gear, unlocking buffs, that all culminate in this incredible power progression system that I genuinely just love. My point being, this game scratches that itch perfectly. Let's discuss flaws. Oh Christ, I'm about to do it again. So in the first game, damn it! In the first game, if you encountered a negative situation enough times, you'd be given the option to receive a flaw. Basically, it'd work like this. Take 15% more plasma damage in exchange for a perk point. Every flaw rewarded the player with a perk point, and as I implied earlier, the perks in the Outer Worlds are absolute dog. Contrast this to the Outer Worlds 2, where flaws are still here, but give unique trade-offs depending on the flaw. Let's take Technophobia for an example, where you take 20% more damage from auto mechanicals, but you also deal 20% more damage to them. You're being sculpted into a cannon made of glass, but only in this specific scenario. Flaws in this game are generally a lot more creative in what spurs them and what the trade-offs are. Like, there's a flaw in this game that forces you to take every flaw that's offered. The mechanic is consuming itself like some coded Ouroboros. I find the system to be an improvement, but also a detriment. Now that we have real perks in the game, I'm a tad bit disappointed that I can't take an optional nerf to then invest in my current build. The situational buffs are exactly that. Situational. It makes the balancing less than stellar and just exists for very light role-playing opportunities. Out of the baker's dozen of flaws that the game threw at me, not once did I stop and think, wow, that seems useful. Like, I get what they were going for, and some of the flaws are cute and worth getting just for the laugh, but they really aren't worth the consideration for their associated detriment. Maybe if, like, they gave you the option for the optional buff that comes with it, or a perk in exchange for the debuff, like you get to pick between the two, I think that'd be a massive improvement to the current system.
You know what else is massive?
They also changed the inhaler. Fallout has stim packs, Elder Scrolls has potions, and the Outer Worlds has Adreno. In this game, instead of being an item that grants an immediate health increase, they made it so there's some skill involved. When using the inhaler to restore health, upon burning an inhaler charge, you're also building up toxicity. Now I know what you're thinking, that's a great album, and yes, I agree. But here, it's bad. When your toxicity meter maxes out, your health restoration is cut, and you can't use your inhaler again until it clears, effectively cutting you off from using your primary way of restoring health. This makes for a great balancing act, and it caused me to rely on my Adreno inhaler as a worst case scenario. This causes so much anxiety because goddamn is it scarce in the early game. I mean, it isn't in the late game, but that's another story entirely. Also, the inhaler has 4 primer slots, all of which can be swapped out with different primers that you come across. Want more health in exchange for more toxicity? How about a slower regen health that heals you more overall? Or how about you combine them both and make a powerful hit that'll crash you after one use? It's a neat system, and I think it truly makes something as simple as a reskinned health potion become a lot more creative from a design and gameplay perspective. The other gameplay things I have to mention are all smaller points and don't require several paragraphs to explain, so let's burn through them really quickly and end the section. This stuck out to me, especially after my Avowed video, but you can't swap out your companion's equipment anymore. They have their own weapon and armor, which I was not too happy to see. I liked giving my old unique armor to my companions in the first game, so this was just not my thing. Crafting exists, like you can make more ammo, grenades, and stuff. It makes picking up garbage and breaking down equipment all the more worthwhile. You haven't gamed until you crafted 1,000 bullets in one go at a workbench, and just go to town on corporate bozos. Oh, and it's fun to do that in the game too. There's a bounty system now. On one hand, this can make the world and factions seem more alive. On the other hand...
Getting curious about other people's belongings, are you? Think you're being subtle? Auntie's choice don't look kindly upon thievery. Don't move! You, stay out of there! You there! Get away from that door! Auntie's choice don't look kindly upon thievery. Think you're being subtle? That ain't yours. Caught in the act.
I killed this guy's friend, and he's heckling me. Compadre, friend. Nigonatate. Next, let's touch on the various companions in the game. I'll give a quick explanation as to who they are, what they're capable of, and how I feel about them. This section will be brief because I genuinely don't want to waste an entire page explaining why this game's robot companion pales in comparison to the last game's robot companion. I'll hit on the important parts, explain their quests if they're notable, and give my verbal pollici-verso on them. First is Niall Zabara. He's the first real companion you'll meet, and he's the most integral to the overall story of the game. His voice actor, Eugene Bird, did a fantastic job at portraying the character as well. There is so much emotion behind the lines that really matter, it makes the character of Niles feel so real. Niles is a dedicated Earth Directorate agent that is stuck with you to fulfill a quest of revenge against the one rogue that betrayed his trust. This revenge quest is also your main motivator for the start of the game, so you and him are journeying through the first planet, Eden, to dig up whatever you can on this traitor. He's a man that is haunted by the sins of his past, and it's executed in a really good way that it makes him a super compelling character.
For what? Because of a few equations? Some dots and lines on a graph? Good fucking law. I mean, she wasn't a damn scientician. She said it herself. She didn't understand all of it, the math. So what was she thinking? How can you be so even-tempered about this? I know you didn't know her like I did. like I thought I did, but she betrayed us. She killed our friends, Commander. Damn it! I never wanted to talk about this. I wanted to just leave it alone.
Throughout the story, you'll be at odds with Niles, and he has his mind set as to what he believes needs to be done to right the errors of a decade gone by. He's dwelled on what's happened to such an extent that has driven him to bloodlust. This will cause him to question you, scold you, and lose his faith in you, his only friend and confidant for the last decade. What makes this work so well is that he decides that he wants to stop in and meet up with his doctor and old friend, who goes through the exact same arc that he does. His friend's arc is the entirety of Niles' companion quest. It starts with his old friend, Zebulon, a rebel and undercover freedom fighter that's fighting against the Protectorate, being standoffish from Niles for having abandoned him for several years. We opt in to help his squad from imprisonment, free the sole survivor, and then make contact with Zeb later, who then tells us that the person we freed was hunted and killed. This kickstarts Niles' second quest, which has him at odds with Zebulon, trying to counter his own revenge and bloodlust for the Protectorate. Niles makes the argument that we cannot harm innocents no matter the risks. We cannot fix past mistakes in the present. We can only do what we can to improve our current reality. This all concludes with him stating that he finally understands why the traitor, who again is the initial antagonist in the story that has personally wronged you and Niles, did what she did. Once we get to the story section, this will hit a lot harder, I promise. He understands the pressure of standing blindly by allies and the difference between standing for preconceived ideals against saving innocent lives. Niles' story and arc is so expertly done, and it parallels the main story of The Outer Worlds 2 as well as his former friend Zebulon. The pushback that Niles gave you is reflected in how Zeb is treating Niles, all of which helps him understand the value of protecting innocents and upholding virtues as an Earth Directorate agent, regardless of his own ill-advised vendettas. It's a beautiful story in such an intentionally cynical and depressing setting, and it's why I think Niles is great. Yeah, Inez is cool, I guess. She's a grafted soldier, which, yep. To really make her viable, you have to do a quest to determine which animal she'll be grafted with. This determines her companion ability, which is a really cool way of introducing her to the player. Hey, here's a new companion, now choose what role they should fill. That's just a really interesting idea for a first-person RPG that doesn't utilize a class system. Beyond that, she's an Auntie's Choice soldier and has the goal of getting back into the company for security. She then realizes that the grafted super soldier program was an experiment to get Auntie Cleo a new body, and they never really cared for the actual soldiers that underwent the horrendous experiments. It's interesting world building and a perfect twist that suits the corporate entity really well. But I didn't find Inez as a character to be all that interesting. She is one of my preferred companions from a gameplay perspective, but narratively I just didn't really care. Val is like Sam, aka she's the robot companion that doesn't have a real character or arc or development or anything. They are an Earth Directorate automechanical unit, so she is related to you and Niles in that sense and does offer some funny lines, but she isn't a deep character and doesn't have a real companion quest. Azza is insane? Azza is a rift cultist. So she's part of a group called the Glorious Dawn. As it turns out, the Glorious Dawn put a kill order on Azza's head, and I've been hunting her down. What makes this interesting is that Azza isn't all that perturbed by this discovery. She's so incredibly unhinged and overtly violent that it's genuinely disturbing at times. Well anyways, this one-note psychopath learns that her entire cult was a fake group that was expertly created by the Protectorate, and then she kills the Protectorate lady that apparently orchestrated the whole thing. This quest fucking sucks. It's kind of funny that Azza has no development whatsoever, even when she's faced with the obvious sign of her entire character being a lie. But also, like, it doesn't make for an enjoyable adventure. I could feel the excitement leave my body towards the tail end of her companion quest. I just didn't vibe with it at all. Marisol exists. Next. Finally, there's Tristan. Oh, Tristan, my beloved.
If this is an attempted jest, it is not funny. If it is not a jest, I'm going to act as if it were. For your sake.
Tristan is what I like to call a good character. He is a Protectorate arbiter, aka a judge, jury, executioner type for a tyrannical government. Before you can officially team up with him, you have to accompany him for an investigation of a refugee camp that was attacked. After coming to a conclusion, you realize that his personal goal right now is to figure out who killed his mentor, the Supreme Arbiter. This leads to him crossing paths with other members of the Protectorate, from junior arbiters to sentinels, and even his old friend Virgil, whom of which is actually helping us in the investigation. We get to see how Tristan acts, judges others, and above all else, upholds the values of the Protectorate law. Now that he has gone AWOL for his own investigation, he has become the subject of the current crop of Protectorate lackeys. So there are two sides of the Protectorate, it seems. There's the Consul and their Sentinels, and there's the Supreme Arbiter and their, well, Arbiters? It's discovered that the Supreme Arbiter, Tristan and Virgil's mentor, decided to renege on her steadfast ideals and work with the Consul. Well, it's discovered that Virgil, the easygoing, lax lawbringer and longtime friend to Tristan, was the one that killed the Supreme Arbiter after overhearing her pledge her allegiance to the Consul. What makes this questline work is the development that we see. Throughout various stops with Tristan, we see how steadfast he is to uphold Protectorate values, but over time, through you, he learns to judge people as humans and not as numbers. A junior arbiter comes to accuse Tristan of crimes against the Protectorate. Tristan realizes that he must follow his own sense of justice and morals, as to mindlessly judge people, like the junior arbiter, by the book would result in needless bloodshed. She was following orders. She was following the law as explained to her, just as he did when you two first met. Arbiters themselves aren't held to the law, but their own jurisdiction as granted via central command of the Protectorate. They're tasked with upholding the laws, but their judgment is to be decided based upon the perspective of the accuser. This gap in logic is what gets the junior arbiter to stand down. When faced with his longtime best friend and true killer of his mentor, Tristan doesn't know how to properly judge Virgil. He's torn two different ways: do as he's learned and spare his brother in arms, or deal with the killer that he's been hunting. The conclusion, ultimately, is that he spares Virgil and understands that if Arcadia is meant to thrive, then we need to factor in the wisdom and logic that humans can provide. By understanding and treating humans as exactly that, the Protectorate can hopefully change their ways for the better. You could argue that it's a fruitless effort, a continuous uphill battle, but it also sparks hope that the Protectorate and Arcadia are not entirely compromised ideas. The colony of Arcadia can survive with people like Tristan. The Protectorate can grow beyond their inhumane nature if people like Tristan are present to interpret the law. What makes Tristan special as a character to me is that it takes the idea of being anti-Protectorate, but from the side of the Protectorate. Tristan doesn't hate the tyrants he serves, but he understands their logic is flawed in practice. This is what the story is really about, him understanding why blindly judging people is not a healthy endeavor for a society. The colony is falling because of misunderstood calculations, and he's having to take lives on a case-by-case individual basis. It's just so feel-good and well done, and it's truly impressive that characters like Tristan and Niles both come from the same game that has Azza. With all the companions out of the way, and before we jump headfirst into the story, I want to mention something that heavily impacts the main quest and other moments throughout the game, and that's dialogue. Like any good RPG, there are several ways to interact with characters to varying results. If you aren't arsed to invest in the speech skill, then you can still manipulate dialogue via other skill checks. This is kind of a staple of Obsidian games, but it's just so good to be able to reason with people beyond one singular skill. One skill doesn't win every convo. In fact, it's very situational. Skills like science, engineering, leadership, and observation are all very common in dialogue as well, which lends itself to replayability. I want to try a completely different build partially because of these skill checks. How would these closed off options work? What would they get me? And how would the bonuses outside of dialogue benefit me best? There's also the aspect of rewarding inquisitive players. By coming along certain computer logs, data cartridges, or dialogue branches, you can then use that information later in dialogue. The game lets you know when you're doing this too, which is kinda neat. It's not neat in the sense that they're caressing my stupid chimp brain by giving me an indicator showing that I stumbled upon something. Rather, it's neat because it clues the player in on the idea. Upon saying that you can be locked out of dialogue by not having the proper info, this could incentivize the player to spend more time sleuthing before engaging. With that aside out of the way, we can now talk about the story proper. Oh boy. Let's start at the beginning. The prologue that sets the player up is great. I will always champion games that throw me into the open world and let me explore, but if you're going to shove a curated introduction down my throat, then it doesn't get much better than this. You are an Earth Directorate agent heading out to the Arcadia colony, a space colony formed by the Protectorate and the home of skip drive technology. This technology is responsible for mankind's interstellar travel. For reasons not disclosed to us now, the Earth Directorate has no authority in Arcadia, and we're told that we're on our own during this mission. Our mission is to discover any information on the link between the skip drive technology and the rift anomalies that have been opening up in pockets of space. It's apparently clear that the two are somehow connected, and the rifts are too dangerous to keep cropping up at the current rate. So it's up to us, the captain of the Incognito, to go to Horizon Point and carry out our task. Horizon Point is a great prologue simply because it introduces so much to the player. various overworld traps you can tinker with, an introduction to the core skills, dialogue, combat, the new gadget system. It's just a perfect introduction from a gameplay sense. It's also a great introduction story-wise, as the whole mission goes belly up, your two recruits are fucked by an explosion, and your directorate point of contact, Agent DeVries, turns on you and causes a rift to swallow the entire facility. This leads to your player barely escaping via cryopod and being out of action for a decade. 10 years go by, and your trusty Earth Directorate robot Val and the only surviving agent from your squad, Niall Zabara, save you from your pod, and the three of you set out on getting revenge. Just in this short introduction, you are faced with every major plot point of the game, who the main baddies are, in inverted commas, and it perfectly outlines who the captain and their companions are. I'd say the one issue is that the whole background system, while neat in theory, does pigeonhole the experience for me. As I said earlier, it's cool to pick a soft origin for your character to open up new dialogue to use in-game. Conversely, when you get such an expansive opening that not only tells you who your character is, but it also comes with plenty of dialogue opportunities to define your character in your own way, then the whole background system just puts a stranglehold around your role-playing neck. Something I do really love about the prologue is that when you leave the cockpit of your ship at the very beginning, Niles, still a fresh recruit going on his first mission at this point, asks you for advice. He sees you as a decorated captain of the Directorate, so he wants your advice, and whatever you tell him, it will come up later during the prologue when he gets blown up. Bro loses his limbs and is on death's door, yet he's still trying to rely on your advice to continue on. It's a very cute moment that's turned into an absolutely heartbreaking one. It's made even more heartbreaking when you see how he's turned out a decade later, as a proud soldier that has sacrificed so much for the sake of revenge on DeVries. With the prologue out of the way, we can now talk about the first real main quest, that being infiltrating the Vox Relay Station. On the first planet of Eden, DeVries apparently used to work at the Protectorate's Vox Relay Station, so we're to go there and see if we can track her down. Before we can get to the station, we have to cross this geological crevice to gain access to her destination, and what's great about this setup is that there are, I believe, 6 different avenues you can take. If there are more, I haven't discovered them yet, but holy moly, 6 is a lot. There's an Auntie's Choice settlement that has 2 different quest givers you can work with to gain access, so there's 2 of the options. You can go to the town at the east called Westport. Is this a Greenland-Iceland situation? Damn Vikings. The Vigilant here will tell you of a way to cross the ravine if you help him rebuild the town. That's 3. You could go straight to the heavily defended Protectorate Bridge and do a task for the main guard to be allowed to pass. There's 4. Or you could just run in guns blazing and storm the bridge without being given access and fight your way through. It's not a quest, but it is a method, I'll count it. Or if you've explored the map or played the game before, you could just find one of the alternative methods that the previous options provide and just run straight through it, allowing you to skip all the fluff if you'd fancy. Giving the players several different methods of going to the same place, all aligning with someone else, doing whatever feels best for the character you're trying to make, it all just feels so good to explore again and again and again. I call this replayability, something that is very important for a video game. Give me a reason to want to come back, especially since I spent money on this game. Actually, a friend surprised me with it, so thank you so much, Anthony. If you're watching this, thank you. After coming off of Avowed, a game that forces you to make a sequence of laughable binary decisions that ultimately mean nothing and carry no weight, it is so incredibly refreshing to be bombarded immediately with a plethora of options, all just to go to this one location. Hopefully this freedom carries on to the rest of the game. Spoilers, it does. I know, I'm surprised as well. Once you secure your method of entry, you can head to Vox Relay, witness a psychopath commit a routine execution, and, assuming you assisted the Vigilant of Westport, team up with this jackoff to take down the Psycho Brigadier as requested. After accessing one of DeVries' terminals, she contacts you via Zoom to say, "Yo, prepare to die, idiot," and an emergency failsafe kicks in, plotting a flight plan for the station to crash right into Auntie's Choice's settlement. Before you make your grand escape from the station, you can either leave it be, change the trajectory to Westport instead, or reroute the console to send the station to space where no innocents will be harmed. Unfortunately, that last one has a skill check and I didn't meet the requirements. I did have the lucky trait though, which allowed me to, quote, see if hitting it does anything, which results in the casualty-free ending. Thank God nobody got harmed, barring all the people I killed on the way here. Vox Relay is an incredible first planet finale. Not only are there just so many blooming ways to get there, but once you're inside, the story is passable, the combat is energetic, and the boss fight is challenging. To cap it all off, we miss out on our target, prolonging our current revenge mission, whilst also being presented with another choice that not only carries weight narratively, but also in a role-playing and larger gameplay sense. Destroy Westport? Yeah, okay, say goodbye to unfinished quest. This quest is so good and a lovely way to introduce the player to the game. I really have no criticisms of the execution. Really, the only thing I do have an issue with is that every Protectorate soldier, barring the 2 named ones that you're told by the game are significant, are immediately aggro. Why can't I talk my way through, blend in, avoid killing these people? I don't have to kill these clowns, but these ones, oh boy, they're special. It saddens me to say that the Protectorate are the steel garrote of this game, i.e. the villains for the sake of villains. Now, other games like, say, Fallout New Vegas, Cyberpunk 2077, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines all let you align yourself with a clear evil faction in some fashion, giving their route their own plot paths and endings. Another game did this too. What was it called? Oh yeah, The Outer Worlds. I'll bring this point up later when we have a clear picture of the entire story, but for now I'll just say I'm a little bit disappointed with how the Protectorate are being treated at this juncture. Little did I know, it perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with the writing in this game. Next is Dorado, a planet with 2 locations of interest. The Xyranthium facility where you go to either recruit or kill a companion. While I don't like Marisol as a character, I do like this introduction for her. The narrative here isn't too impactful overall, it's just a requirement for the story. That story being, Scientologists fucking suck. Having the option to just kill a companion upon meeting them though is cool. The Order has an internal faction, led by the seer Landon Wiley, to take over this ginormous monastery. That's our second location of interest on this planet. On Vox Relay, we see in DeVries' logs that she was corresponding with someone that was unhappy with their position, how the Order needs to course correct, and as it turns out, that person was Seer Wiley. He's been in contact with DeVries and has taken over the monastery as a way of correcting the Order to fit his ideals, while also providing DeVries with everything she needs to interrupt the upcoming peace talks between the Order and Auntie's Choice. After fighting your way through the monastery, you come face to face with the Seer. You can reason with him and talk him down, with logic that his plan is futile and that his superior, the abbot, never valued him. Which he already knew, but seemed surprised about for some reason. Man, this part, while fun, is definitely a step down. There's nothing wrong with the man-in-the-room type encounters, but we had one at Vox Relay with a sanity-passed brigadier. Now we have some science-loving weirdo threatening innocence and helping our main antagonist. And we use pre-established knowledge that he would know to talk him down? No real options before or after this point, nothing impacts the trajectory of the narrative or the stakes. It's just, God, what happened here? Add on to this, the absolute state of ennui the Order puts me in. The first game had the OSI, the Order of Scientific Inquiry. It was this group similar to the corporations that talked about the architect and the grand plan for the colony. In this game, the Order is a splinter group that separated from the Protectorate after Auntie's Choice invaded the colony. They champion math and predict everything via a grand equation and follow these formulas as their religion basically. It's a neat idea, but I personally found it grating after a while. Like just in this one section, there is so much goddamned babble about numbers, science, oh the percentage of whatever was infallible. Like please, for the love of all things holy, shut the fuck up. I totally understand if it was written this way to be intentionally annoying as sin. This could be a setup for a very obvious commentary about real-world interactions and the removal of common faith in favor for perceived science and history. Like the corporations, this could be the writer's chance to laugh at this real-world concept. I don't think that's what they were going for, though. I think they wanted to laugh at the concept, but didn't intend for any substantial commentary or subtext. They're the logical order that split off from tyrants, and despite their problems, they're the faction that is played completely straight near the ending. It just feels uninteresting to be hit with a flat group of weirdos that have no real meat on their metaphorical bones.
The simple version is this. The force which we call the Grand Architect created the universal equation that underlies and defines everything in the universe. Everything flows from the equation, or in layman's terms, the grand plan. Is the Grand Architect a consciousness? A natural force? Did it create the equation on purpose? The answers to these questions don't really matter. The equation, the plan, is all that matters. Contentment is found by accepting one's role in the plan.
Gambling is for those who lack an understanding of basic probability theory. I don't make wagers. I make predictions. Accurate ones.
Ultimately, I think the Dorado Monastery is a neat setting that houses a rubbish quest with no stakes or intrigue within. You either talk to a crazed rebel, or you hawk Tua the Seer and spit on his corpse. It's a massive step down in almost every way from Vox Relay. The only saving grace is that it sets up for the peace talks, and we will know where and when to find DeVries. Our quest is for revenge, and this leads up to the upcoming assassination attempt, which is a great setup for the next story beat. So, let's talk about it. This brings us to the Greater Tranquility Station, a space station that is acting as the scene for the negotiation between the Order and Auntie's Choice. Off the bat, I love the setting of this mission. Yes, it's another yet cold, lifeless hunk of metal, but the scale of everything adds to the sense of urgency. There are these horizontal lifts that move you across the station, and having to wait for it to move allows you to just take in how large of a space you're in. It's intimidating to a degree. You're on a time crunch to stop an assassination while you hear the two delegates argue with each other in the background, and all you can do is realize how much ground you have to cover. It really puts into perspective how the odds are stacked against you, even if the mission itself in-game isn't really that difficult. There was this weird part on the station where you have to turn off the power to walk through a giant fan. Makes sense, right? Well, later they block you with another giant fan, but with no way to turn it off. I spent like 20 minutes trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. Eventually, I tried the tactical time dilation because I was trying anything out of desperation, and you know what? It works! Using TTD to pass through hazards like this has not been used before this instance, nor does it come back later in the game. But hey, it worked! Also, TTD allows you to slow everything down, including yourself, kind of like VATS. I don't know how the player is supposed to reasonably gauge that this was the solution, and it kind of just ruined the atmosphere that was built. Like before, I was invested in the supposed stakes of what was happening, but I'm just annoyed at the video game for not explaining mechanics. Thankfully though, the rest of the mission makes up for the singular blunder. You eventually enter a big open room, with two platforms separated from each other. The rogue soldiers on the other side are working for DeVries and are constantly aggroed onto you. You have to activate two fuse boxes to extend a bridge to get to the other side, while they're trying to snipe at you and your companions. It's a lovely set piece and an interesting take on an ambush objective. It takes the large-scale corridors of the station that I was praising for the aesthetic and uses them to make for a fun gameplay-oriented objective. And then we meet with DeVries. We finally get a worthy man-in-the-room type moment, one that feels earned. We spent the entire game up until now with the goal of tracking her down, and, well, now we have. Her being a turncoat agent, wanting to stop the negotiations, turning the Order on itself, what was her goal this whole time? Well, here we are to be told from the horse's mouth. Horizon Point was the Protectorate's facility that studied rifts and skip drives. Seers from the Order got in touch with DeVries and told her that the Protectorate's research would destroy the colony. When the Order's other predictions and estimations came true, it caused DeVries to believe them entirely and take drastic measures to withhold the research from the Protectorate, even if it meant costing you and your crew their lives. Fast forward 10 years, and she's trying to prevent the Order from brokering peace with Auntie's Choice because she doesn't want a shred of the research on rifts to fall into the corporation's hands. If Auntie had the rift data, they could, hypothetically, use it as a weapon to wage war on the colony again, only leading to a higher number of casualties. This is how you write one of these moments, utilizing speech checks and prior interactions to show her that what she's doing could be a mistake. If the Order is as infallible as DeVries believes, then why would this partnership with Auntie's Choice be the one singular mistake that does them in? Why would DeVries ignore their calculations this once, as if she finally knows better than they do? She sees the corporations as a threat, which it reasonably is, but the problem is that her own logic doesn't make sense. She began to see people as nothing more than variables and numbers, causing her to lose sight of her duties as an agent of the Earth Directorate. Once you're able to catch her in her logic gap of not trusting the Order for this instance and reminding her of her old friend back on Eden, she will stand down and acknowledge that her judgment has been compromised. It's no Legate Lanius or anything, but for a mid-game confrontation with her current adversary, it's a great moment and one of the best parts of the game for me. Better still is how midway through the conversation, Niles will interrupt the dialogue claiming he's heard all he needs to hear. All that's left now is for you to give him the order to kill DeVries. What's good about this interjection is that if you tell him no, you need to pass a speech check with him to keep him in line. This gets elaborated on later when he chastises you and hints that he can't trust you as a leader, since you didn't have what it took to put DeVries down. You sparing her is antithetical to what she would have done if the roles were reversed, which is Niles' logic for why she needs to be written off. Fight fire with fire, so to speak. This is brought up later when he apologizes for lashing out like he did, and ultimately agrees that it was good she was spared. I said this earlier, but Niles truly is one of the best parts of this game. His dynamic with you and DeVries, his connection to the story as a whole, and his whole down-to-earth nature just makes him the perfect character for this narrative. And his writing excels with scenes like this. Anyways, the station gets destroyed. Yep, a rift appears out of nowhere and stops the peace talks. Now you have to run off the station and not get sucked up by the spatial anomaly. This marks a new chapter in the story, or rather a new act, specifically the third act, the grand finale, whatever. To kickstart the third act of the game, we get to choose who we side with. Do we side with the Order? Do we side with Auntie's choice? Or, in the route that I ultimately decided to go down, do we get Auntie Cleo and the Bishop of the Order to host negotiations and form a truce? I went with this third option as I had talked DeVries down from preventing the negotiations to broker peace between the two factions, so it only seemed right that I try to finish the deal. Alternatively, there is another option, not siding with any faction and just doing the main quest. I actually really love the negotiation scene as well. You mediate a Zoom call between the two leaders of opposing factions, and they play their parts perfectly. Auntie Cleo is obviously a cunning snake that is solely motivated by profit, whilst the Bishop, I forget her name? Ruth Bizarre? Bethar? Hang on, let me check real quick actually. Oh, Ruth Bizarre. Basar, Ruth Basar. You can tell that this character really left an impression on me. Anyway, she's emotionless and boring. There are 3 key points you have to make decisions for during the negotiation. Who gains control of the archive on Cloister, who will oversee the production of skip drives, and who will gain access to the Protectorate's rift technology. Bishop Bizarre then brings up how she needs gas? I don't know, man, I just didn't care enough to pay attention to it after this convo. It may seem as though I lost interest in the story around this part of the game. Well, it seems that way because I did. I am an incredibly cynical individual. This game's story and writing should be right up my alley, but the disconnect between the player and the factions truly weighed down the game for me. Let's use an example. In, I don't know, let's say the Outer Worlds? The corporations are treated as jokes. The game is very explicit in its commentary about corporatism and capitalism. Almost every suit in the game is a complete farce of a human and is intentionally written to be comically unrelatable. Even still though, you had characters like Sanjar and Reed Thompson, who you could actually relate to. They represented the corporations of the game, but they still had qualities that made them more than corporate drones. They were human. Characters like this aren't in the Outer Worlds too. The game is filled with one-note facades that exist to play the tune of whatever faction they belong to. Folks of the Order are all about calculations and dehumanizing people. People under Auntie's choice are all about consumerism. There is no intrigue, no depth, no sauce. When I'm 30 hours into this game and given the option to pick with who I should side with, and I have no real connection with any of these goobers beyond the game forcing me to interact with them, then I get mad. Like, oh geez, I guess I'll have them negotiate. Like, truthfully, I didn't care. This, as all things do, bring us to the magical computer. I have nothing to actually say about this part of the game, actually. Basically, we need to seize control of the archive, a magical computer underground in Cloister. With this computer, we can process rift data and hopefully be able to actually close the rifts permanently. Well, as it turns out, the game likes having you decide dumb shit and has you choose which AI personality has control of the archive. Each personality is supposed to represent one of the 3 main factions: Actuational, Profitalist, and Sovereigntist. I picked Sovereigntist because I was clinging on to hope that I could side with the Protectorate. Listen, the Protectorate are tyrants, a futuristic Roman Empire built upon a history of lies and deceit that utilize actual brainwashing technology. Here's the thing though, they are by far the most interesting faction in the game. Like I said earlier, this game treats the Protectorate like the Steel Garrote from Avowed. They're villains because the game wants to have villains. Unlike the Steel Garrote though, the Protectorate never do anything to the player. We can hear of their brutality through optional side quests, be told about how the Order separated from them, but we also get to meet characters like Corbin, Tristan, the Vigilant of Westport, all well-meaning people that want what's best for the world they inhabit. I was hoping to get that Caesar moment, where you could actually meet the talking head for the Protectorate and listen to their ideals, their philosophy. I wanted the opportunity to understand why they do what they do, to understand why they're portrayed as a terribly misguided faction. Instead, we're supposed to believe they're evil because the rule show don't tell doesn't exist in Arcadia, it seems. I didn't want to be a tyrant, I didn't want to go down the evil route, but when the most interesting faction is the one I can't align myself with, and it's also an entirely passive presence in the story, then I just mentally check out after a bit. Gameplay was fun, but dang did the story just lose its shine after a while. This leads us to the true finale. The rift begins unfolding itself and Horizon Point Station comes back from the dead, and we're supposed to board it, then go to the Protectorate ship. Why couldn't we go straight there? I don't know, but it makes for a lovely set piece. This all leads up to the final confrontation. We get to speak face to face with the Protectorate console. Well, this is it. This is the man in the room moment that I wanted with the Protectorate. And it's rubbish. Something I neglected to mention earlier is that the console actually used the Protectorate's brainwashing technology to mentally incapacitate the true leader of the Protectorate, the Sovereign. We also witnessed, through Tristan's story, how the console was gaining the control of the Arbiters, therefore spreading his reach across both aisles of the faction. We've been told how this console is one scary man, and how he's an evil in a pit of evil. So what went wrong? Again, I wanted to have a conversation to understand the Protectorate, but like all other talking heads in this game, the console is a flat, unremarkable critter. It turns out that the Protectorate is using the rift technology to create rifts, and the console wishes to create a rift to swallow the colony, and then reverse the effects to create loyal subjects?
I'll only be killing a select number permanently. The worthy, however, will be resurrected and reformed so they may reach their full potential.
What?
Open your mind, Commander.
What?
Yes, I know well who you are.
What?
I don't know, this is just fucking bizarre and weird. You can talk him down, something that I wasn't able to do because I lacked the skills and all pieces of required knowledge. I'm not going to take this final confrontation seriously, because it seems the writers didn't either. Some of his lines go hard, and it's fun tripping him up with dialogue checks, but as it stands, it's just an embodiment of what doesn't work in my opinion. He's a facade of nonsense with no motivation beyond, aha, tyrants want loyal subjects and the rift will do it for me. Which is, funnily, the same thing that the Order and Auntie's Choice have been trying to achieve as well. They didn't use rifts, but you see them make attempts to try to force their citizens to follow certain paths or mindsets, which makes this whole final showdown and reveal laughable because it's not even evil by the own universe's standards. This game's writing really jumped off a cliff after the DeVries confrontation, and it makes me genuinely question if this was the original ending for the game. Did they write the script up to the DeVries confrontation and then realize that the game needed to be longer? I've tried looking this up, but I couldn't find anything, so at this point it's just speculation. Regardless, it makes so much sense in my mind. The story starts super strong with the prologue. It carries on with phenomenal writing from Niles, the great beginning segment with Vox Relay, and even the introduction with the Corporation and to the Order feel very unique and consistent with everything else we've seen. Greater Tranquility Station feels like the setting for a finale, an intense, grand mechanical marvel with large distance to cover to stop a personal enemy from causing further damage. Once you escape and are given the option to side with a faction, everything crumbles. It's really funny to me because DeVries is portrayed as a misguided turncoat that believes the seers from the Order, and then you're given the option to side with the Order, whom of which spout the exact same type of rhetoric. What was the point of stopping DeVries then? It was to broker peace between two factions that are doing the exact same thing that your main enemy is doing. It really makes no sense. No more story babble. Instead, let's talk about the technical aspects of the game. Unreal Engine 5 is rubbish. Christ above, how is UE5 so bad? Avowed had rough performance, and I mean rough. Outer Worlds 2 had rough performance as well, but it's admittedly better. What do these games have in common? Oh, is that they're built upon one of the worst engines ever. Not since the modern incarnation of their creation engine have we seen something so incredibly rough to deal with. This comes with the staples: inconsistent frame rate, poor performance all around, shaders precompiling and still bugging out, unresponsive menus and toggles, improper visuals, and crashes galore. When I load a save, there is a 20% chance that I just get an error and the game crashes. How the heck has this not been patched? It even happens when I'm trying to start dialogue with some characters, and I'm using Blum and Nvidia's Shadowplay to record this footage because UE5 and OBS don't mix well, and when I get a fatal error in game, it crashes my entire recording and I lose the footage. How am I supposed to deal with this? How has this not been fixed? Beyond all of that, everything is technically sound. But Christ, does it make it hard to fully appreciate. The art direction and visuals are all really strong, but it's met with that typical UE5 blurriness. Add on to that this foliage that is just floating off the ground, and my immersion is ruined. All in all, the environments are visually stunning and great from a design perspective. Cloister is an icy world, yes, but it's also unique in the series and unrivaled by anything else we've seen so far. Praetor is a desolate world with a treacherous environment, constant lightning strikes, and a red and brown grimy terrain that is contrasted by the vibrant azure streams and vegetation. Dorado goes full World War I in its scenery, being host to a battle between Auntie's Choice and the Order, and features honest-to-God trenches surrounded by crystals sprouting from the terrain. While the brown and muted color scheme may leave something to be desired at first glance, the actual layouts, little details, and how you interact with the environment all heighten it to make for a much more pleasing locale when exploring. These developers understand how to make for visually impressive locations and set pieces, and man, they did great with this game. The retrofuturism design philosophy of the setting is in full effect here, as evident with the trenches taking clear inspiration from past wars. This is reflected in the weapons and armor as well. The Protectorate has very militaristic, almost German officer design aesthetic to their uniforms and armor. The light pistol, instead of being a hunk of metal, is based on a Mauser, a real-world firearm popular during the beginning of the 20th century. I'm not a gun nut, far from it actually, but as someone with mentally distressing levels of detail fixation and observation, all of the weapons look more realistic. It helps that a large variety of the arsenal featured is inspired by real weapons to some extent. What's also incredible, thanks to the new skill system, is that there aren't tiered weapons. In the first game there'd be a light pistol and then a light pistol Mark II, which took the same mods and looked the exact same, but it just had better stats. Seemed lazy and cringe, didn't it? Well, now all the weapons are unique to their class. Ain't that neat? Christ, this is a weird way to cap off the analysis. I don't know what else I can say about the game. I intended for this review to be like 20 minutes, and it just kept growing. After finishing the game, I thought it'd be easy to review. A fun game with worthwhile additions and a lackluster story. That one sentence doesn't do the entire package justice though. The new skill and perk systems are undoubtedly a huge plus to the game. The gunplay is great. The thought and design that went into the new gadgets, weapon, and armor really shows. At the same time, you also have additions like character backgrounds that sort of pigeonhole your creativity when developing an identity for your character. Add on to that inconsistent writing, a really rough third act of the story, uninspired factions and characters that I cannot be bothered to care about. In other words, for every Niles you have a console. One represents what works so well with this game's writing, the other represents everything wrong with it. I've said before, and still do believe, that I prefer games that are fun to play. I will always champion great writing. Video games are a special medium to convey such unique stories with. At the end of the day, this game's writing didn't offend me like Avowed's. I simply lost interest in it. If that's the worst crime it committed, then surely I'm living the dream. Truth is, I wouldn't drag out the analysis of the story if I didn't notice or care about it. It's something I did care about, it's something I was really interested in at first, and it's something that I eventually lost interest in and found to be ineffective in several ways. This video exists to relay that. But Kira, I hear you say, why did you care about the game writing if you prioritize gameplay? Well, the answer to that is really quite simple. For one, I like to roleplay in role-playing games. Insane concept, I know. 2, this is a sequel to a game that I genuinely love, a game that I think has a good story. Naturally, I'd want to be intrigued by the successors. And lastly, because even if I am able to turn my brain off and mash through convos as fast as possible, I'm still playing a game where every situation, encounter, reason for being is dictated by and services the plot, the story. The narrative is the crux for everything that should reasonably happen within a work. Here, it's a squeaky floorboard. Yeah, it's solid, I can walk on it, it does its job, but I know something is wrong because I hear that squeak every time I walk on it. Now to answer the question, do I prefer this game over the original? No, I don't. While this game admittedly has more going for it in terms of raw gameplay and stuff to do, I am more partial to the simplicity of the original. The simple weapons, storytelling, introduction, etc. Less is more, and while the first game can feel cheap by comparison, if you're able to endure the shortcomings that come with it, I think the simplicity adds to the experience overall. The perks and flaws in the first game are absolutely trash by comparison. Hell, even out of comparison, they're just trash in general. But the characters, story, technical performance, and visuals of the first game far surpass the sequel in my opinion. It's fun. Maybe if the sequel was made on a different engine, published by a different company, and didn't shit the bed when it came to writing characters, then it'd hold a light to the original. As it stands, I find the detriments to be too detrimental, keeping the original firmly in my list of favorite games of all time, while leaving this one out of that list simultaneously. Well, that's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed the video, then cool! I'm glad I was able to entertain you for a bit. I recommend you check out my other recent videos. Links to my socials are in the description. Stay tuned for the inevitable Outer Worlds review. I plan on covering the base game sometime this year. Also, I do not plan on covering any more games that require me to use NVIDIA Shadowplay. After the Avowed video and this one, I am absolutely sick of this program. All the same, thank you so much for watching, and have a great one. Okay, bye-bye.